confession to make this morning to you all in the privacy of this space. For years and years, I must confess to you that I have been, well, less than truthful with you on occasion. And I fear that I am not alone in having committed this sin. I, along with many of my colleagues in ministry over the years, have been saying certain things publicly to certain people who were in a certain state of mind as if they were the gospel truth, when in point of fact we have had no real way of knowing whether or not the things we have said were true. For instance, I have been known to say once, upon the time of the tragic death of a 6-year-old child, a joyful, exuberant, precocious rascal of a child who would occasionally get into trouble, I've been known to say to people who were grieving the death of that child that her spirit is alive and well, and that she is in a place beyond any place that we can know, tying people's shoestrings together or trying to steal sips of wine while all the adults are looking the other way. And just so we're clear, I don't have any proof that such an assertion is true. I don't know that there's a little room in heaven designated for rascally children and forgiving adults where all will be well. But I acted like I did. I can tell you that as I looked over that room of grief, I can tell you that I said it as if it in fact had happened. And there were nodding heads and at least one or two smiles. Then there was this other time, back several years ago, I told a crowd of people who had gathered there on the wooden, old-style folding chairs in the old school funeral home, you know, the kind with the big, heavy burgundy drapes, to mourn the death of 92-year-old Harold Wakeland. I said something like, people, one day last week, Harold nodded off and fell asleep while he was sitting around a card table playing pinochle with all of his buddies at the VA nursing home. Harold, he dozed for a while, and when old Harold woke up, he was playing pinochle with all the people of his life, the people who'd gone before him in death. Over on this side was his buddy who'd made it through D-Day with him. Across the table was the guy who used to check out his groceries at the Aldi store. On the other side of the table was the gentleman Harold drank coffee with nearly every Tuesday morning. They were all there playing a heavenly game of pinochle. Now what I'd heard from Harold's wife Ada, she was a pistol, was that 92-year-old Harold Wakeland had slumped in his wheelchair during a card game at the VA the week before and peacefully passed away. Harold sure turned. Wake up, Harold. Harold? I knew that part. But what I had no evidence for was about him sitting in that heavenly circle of pinochle players. Even still, I said it like it was a verifiable fact. Last week, Harold Wakeland fell asleep and he woke up. And most of the people in the room seemed to go along with it. Oh yeah, one guy said as he left the funeral home, Harold's keeping honest up there, don't you know it? 3 years ago, I think it's been 3 years now, that we rang a bell for Joan Farley on All Saints' Day. Now, Joan Farley she was something else. She was one of God's saints for sure. Joan lived a satisfied life. But Joan's world wasn't as big as the one most of us live in. One side of Joan's body, her hand and her foot, weren't as strong ever as the other, so she didn't ever get out a whole lot. Mostly she just sat. She lived first with her grandma and her mom, and then by herself, and then in a nursing home. Counted a lot on the kindness of other saints of the church, Otis and Agnes Childers, Sidney Turner, Betty Moore, Shirley Brady. Well, Joan died 3 years or so ago. At the memorial service down here in Catonsville, I stood up in front of a whole group of people, each of whom was very bright and intelligent, very savvy, I might add, and being able to tell truth from non-truth. And I suggested that Joan Farley, I suggested that we not grieve too hard, because Joan was now walking freely without even a hint of a limp. Walking around in the row home of her grandmother that she dearly loved, wearing her grandmother's special apron, helping her bake chocolate chip cookies using both hands, just like she'd done when she was a child. Can I take the cookies out of the oven, Grandma? Let's leave them in a little longer, Joni. You know I like them crisp. I'm not sure if they believed me that day or not. They smiled a little, but I'm here to tell you that I do not know with absolute certainty that heaven looks like Joan Farley's grandmother's kitchen, or Harold Wakeland's pinochle table, or a room full of tipsy adults and empty wine glasses. Stating that something is absolutely true, and it might be more accurate to say we hope it's true. What do you suppose is the difference between this is true on the one hand and I hope on the other? There's kind of a fine line, isn't there? I was thinking about this question as I looked at the book of Revelation this week, and this passage that Bob just read for us. All these things that the writer of the book of Revelation said, he saw, right? He saw that stuff. Did you hear all that stuff he saw? People robed in white, holding palm branches, standing in front of a lamb on a throne. They were living creatures and elders and angels. These images, wow. Along with a lot of other images in the book of Revelation, they strike us as odd and sometimes even a little troubling. I know we might typically say, it's just a dream. You know, we've had some troubling dreams too, right? I get that. But I don't believe the word dream was ever in the book of Revelation. No. He seems to be asking us to think this stuff is true. It's difficult for us to know exactly what all those symbols conjured up in the minds of someone in those days. One thing that we can be pretty sure of is that the scene we just heard about is a scene in which the church is triumphant. Revelation chapter 7 is John of Patmos telling us in vivid imagery that the church is triumphant over all those forces that were threatening the hope of John's people. According to John, church wins. But I don't know. What we have on pretty good authority is that the church in the days of John of Patmos in the year 95 of the Common Era was a lot of things, but triumphant was not one of those things. Church was scattered around Asia Minor. Estimates are that maybe 1 or 2% of the population were followers of Jesus. They were people who existed on the margins out there, hardly triumphant, small, marginalized, teased, bullied. Nothing compared to that Roman Empire. These images from the book of Revelation of the church of triumphant, they arise out of a church that was barely making it. These images of everyone bowing down to Jesus as the Lamb arise out of people like John who are having others laugh in their faces. You see what John was doing? Kind of like what we do when we express our hopes as if they'd already come to pass. The fancy word for it is apocalyptic literature, saying what we hope will happen as if it already has. We do this with the ones we've lost, right? We imagine them in a better place to soften the blow of their death and help us move on. Hope isn't only about dreams of an afterlife, is it? Hope is also what sustains us when our world looks pretty bleak, like it did for those first century Christians. So maybe with some good old-fashioned apocalyptic, we can share a little in the way of images today. Our world may not be quite as desperate as John's was back in the first century, but I've been around you all for the last few months, and there seems to be an element of bleakness. So let's just try it. Over here, I looked and I saw a great nation, these United States, and I saw the world surrounding it, and I saw that we had, in fact, survived the current presidency. And then I looked over here and I saw 7 times 70 women who were shouting hallelujah because they never again would have to worry about being harassed in their workplace. And then there were lines in all the great financial institutions where the 1% were seen emptying their bank accounts so that others might have a place to live and food to eat. And then there were that alley where there were 2 young men that squared off. They each had firearms on one side of the other. Now, why don't we talk about it first? And then behold, the church filled to capacity, standing room only in this church, sending out members into the world like lambs, ready to offer ourselves for the sake of others. In the great stadium, it was filled with people watching that game called football. And there was no more crying, and no more pain, and no more suffering. And you want to know why? They were playing touch. And then, behold, I walked into the Future Care Nursing Home in Irvington, where I was buzzed in, walked down a couple of long hallways filled with people whose glory days were all behind them, but who still held on to their dignity, sitting in chairs, laying in rolling beds, shuffling up and down the hallway. Afternoon. How are you? Blessed, thank you. There were some folks out in the courtyard for a smoke, more than just some. Some playing bingo in the activity room. Turn left at the nursing station. Morning, everybody. Nice day. Joan Farley's room is the one on the right, about 3 doors down. Walked into her room, and there's her roommate without much to say. Walked around the curtain. But Joni was gone. The greeting cards taped to her dresser, looking out over an empty bed. The special shoe she had to have someone put on her foot almost every day of her life was standing in the corner as if it was standing guard. Now, where do you suppose she went? Oh, wait, I know. She's in that kitchen, in that row house, standing in front of that oven, wearing her grandma's favorite apron, waiting impatiently for the cookies to brown. Don't take them out too soon, Jody. You know, I like them kind of crisp. See, there I go again. I have no way of knowing such a thing is true. So instead of knowing, I hope. And I invite you all to do the same.